Good evening. You've made it to the quiet part of the day. Maybe you're in bed. Maybe you're just taking a moment to pause, to rest, to let your thoughts unfurl slowly after the noise of everything else. Tonight's story is about a billionaire who didn't seem to like money very much. You may know his company, IKEA. You may even be lying on one of his beds right now. But you might not know that the man behind IKEA, one of the world's most successful businesses, lived in a modest house, drove a used car, and recycled tea bags. His name was Ingvar Kamprad, and while he was once among the 5 richest men in the world, he didn't behave like any billionaire you've seen on television. There were no yachts, no gold watches, no private islands. Instead, there was a quiet house in Switzerland, a stack of notebooks filled with prices and ideas, a deeply ingrained fear of waste, and a philosophy that the best kind of wealth was the one you didn't have to show off. This episode is not about drama or scandal. There will be no fast-paced montages of rising stock prices or explosive IPOs. Instead, we'll gently walk through the rhythms of a life defined not by indulgence, but by restraint. So settle in, dim the lights, and let's begin with a simple question. What does a billionaire do all day when he's trying not to look like one? But first, if you find comfort in these quiet financial stories, if you enjoy falling asleep to tales of wealth, not noise, then go ahead and tap like subscribe for more slow billionaire bedtime stories and leave a comment below letting us know where in the world you're listening from and what time it is there. We read everyone, and it's oddly lovely seeing how these soft-spoken stories reach so many late-night ears. Now, take one more deep breath, and let's begin. Imagine waking up in a tidy, sunlit room in the Swiss countryside. The sheets are plain. The furniture? Of course, IKEA. Functional, minimal, familiar. There's a small electric kettle in the corner. It's been with you for over 20 years. You reach for the tea bag sitting on a small dish, already used once yesterday, maybe twice. You don't like waste. That was how Ingvar Kamprad liked to begin his mornings. Quiet, predictable, modest. Not because he couldn't afford something else, but because he didn't believe in something else. Kamprad grew up in rural Sweden, on a small farm in Småland, a harsh forested region known for its stony soil and practical people. From the very beginning, Ingvar lived in a culture of thrift. He sold matches door to door at age 5. Later, he moved on to fish, seeds, pens. He didn't have much, but he had discipline and a fixation on doing things more efficiently. He watched his neighbors make do with little. He learned that wealth wasn't something you flaunted. It was something you preserved. And even after the billions arrived, he never forgot that. While other billionaires filled their days with meetings and jet flights, Kamprad preferred the simple life. He booked economy flights, and not just occasionally. He kept receipts, tracked every krona, and reportedly drove a 1993 Volvo for decades, until it was unsafe. He bought second-hand clothes, he clipped coupons. Even at IKEA headquarters, he would eat in the staff cafeteria, often with an eye on who was wasting food. In interviews, he once said, "People say I am cheap. I say I am careful with resources." He preferred traveling by bus, took public transportation in Geneva, and reportedly used IKEA pens to write because, well, why not? They were free and functional. It wasn't about image. Kamprad believed in simplicity, almost religiously. He once wrote a manifesto for IKEA staff titled, "The Testament of a Furniture Dealer." In it, he insisted on humility, plain language, and practicality. No ties in meetings, no luxury cars, no corporate egos. Efficiency wasn't just a business model. It was a way of life. In a world where billionaires compete to be seen, Kamprad hid. Where others built palaces, he downsized. Where others expanded, he standardized. And yet, his company grew to become one of the most powerful furniture brands in the world. Global reach, billions in revenue. And still, the same man with the same old suitcase, staying in modest hotels, writing with a blue IKEA pen. Even his house, tucked away near Lake Geneva, was modest, not sprawling. Inside, you would find IKEA furniture, of course, and some of it, secondhand from older product lines. He tested products himself, lived with them. If a hinge squeaked, he'd make a note. If a design felt excessive, it was trimmed down in the next edition. To live in his home was to live in a catalog, but without the lighting or the staging. Just flat pack functionality, muted colors, clean lines, the smell of strong coffee and the rustle of spreadsheets. As his net worth climbed, $10 billion, then 30, then more, the media took notice. But Kamprad didn't want to be noticed. He wasn't on magazine covers. He rarely gave interviews. When asked about his fortune, he once said, "I don't think I'm especially clever. I'm just good at avoiding waste." While others celebrated excess, he felt embarrassed by his wealth. He created complex structures to give it away or move it into charitable foundations. He feared becoming a symbol of inequality. In his later years, he kept working, slowly, quietly, even after stepping down as CEO. He kept notebooks by his bedside. He followed sales reports. He wrote letters to managers and store designers with little suggestions. His handwriting was famously hard to read. Even in retirement, he lived simply. Friends said his favorite pastime was reading history books, walking near the lake, and making lists of price comparisons between IKEA branches. At the very end of his life, he gave up control of his business entirely. His family would not inherit IKEA. The company was passed into foundations designed to reinvest in design, sustainability, and social causes. No statues, no museums, just a flat-pack legacy and an old man with a pen. Imagine yourself in a cold, forested part of Sweden. The roads are narrow, the landscape simple. It's the 1940s, and post-war Europe is beginning to stir again. Amid the quiet churn of reconstruction, a young man named Ingvar Kamprad is running a one-man business out of his uncle's kitchen. He's not selling furniture yet. At first, it's pens, then wallets, then fish. Each item he sells has one thing in common. It's cheaper than anywhere else. Kamprad's talent isn't invention, it's distribution. He knows how to move goods from point A to point B with shocking efficiency. And most importantly, he knows how to price things low, very low, uncomfortably low. And in the years to come, this quiet obsession with prices, with trimming every edge of inefficiency, will create one of the largest furniture empires in the world. In 1948, Kamprad adds a new item to his catalog, a small side table. It sells well, surprisingly well. People are tired of post-war austerity, but they still can't afford luxury. Kamprad finds a middle path, affordable modernity. The concept grows. Soon he's adding chairs, desks, lamps. But there's a problem. As IKEA's prices keep undercutting local retailers, competitors begin to fight back. Suppliers are pressured to stop selling to Kamprad. Furniture expos block him from displaying. He's essentially blacklisted from the Swedish furniture industry, so he does something unexpected. Instead of fighting for access, he builds his own supply chain. Kamprad begins sourcing directly from Polish factories, reducing costs even further. He establishes his own designers, his own catalog system, his own flat-pack assembly model. The now famous idea of assemble it yourself is born not from customer desire, but from logistics. Unassembled furniture is cheaper to ship, easier to store, and takes up less showroom space. Kamprad isn't thinking about aesthetics. He's thinking about cubic meters and weight per unit. This is where IKEA's real innovation lies. Not in the appearance of the furniture, but in the philosophy behind it. It's furniture for the masses, not the elite. Beautiful in its purpose, not just its shape. By the 1960s, IKEA has grown into a legitimate force. New stores open in Stockholm and beyond. But they don't feel like traditional furniture stores. They feel like experiences. You walk through the showroom as if you're moving through a home. Each room tells a story. There are no pushy salespeople. There's a cafeteria with cheap meatballs. Customers spend hours wandering, dreaming, imagining. It's relaxing, intentional, familiar. Kamprad's vision is everywhere. The tables are modest, the colors neutral, the prices printed large. The signage uses simple language, often lowercase. There is no pretense here, only function. and form that serves it. By the 1980s and 90s, IKEA had become a global brand. Stores in Europe, then Asia, then America. Through it all, Kamprad avoided celebrity. He declined interviews. He rarely appeared in promotional materials. When he traveled to open new stores, he stayed in budget hotels. Even as a billionaire, he insisted on booking economy seats. When he visited IKEA stores, he'd often check the bathrooms to see if they were clean, quietly, without announcement. He once told an interviewer, "The feeling of having saved a krona means more to me than the feeling of having earned one." In an era of brand founders becoming icons, Kamprad became something of an anti-figure, an invisible architect, shaping a world of cheap chairs and unspoken design rules. Till here, Ren. But the path wasn't without shadows. In the 1990s, Kamprad's past came under scrutiny. It was revealed that in the early 1940s, as a teenager, he had briefly attended meetings of pro-fascist groups in Sweden. The discovery caused a scandal. Kamprad apologized, repeatedly. He called it the greatest mistake of his life and spent years trying to make amends. There were also criticisms about IKEA's complex tax arrangements. As IKEA expanded, it built a Byzantine structure of foundations, holding companies and nonprofits, many in low-tax jurisdictions. Kamprad defended this too, not as greed, but as a way to protect IKEA from hostile takeovers and to keep its mission intact. Even here, in controversy, his reasoning echoed his lifelong pattern: protect the company, avoid waste, focus on the long game. Before he died, Kamprad wrote a letter to IKEA employees. In it, he reminded them to stay humble, to keep prices low, to walk the floor, not the boardroom. "We must still keep the spirit of the little village boy from Smoland who has to use his imagination to make ends meet." That was Ingvar Kamprad, not a disruptor, not a tech visionary, not a headline-chasing magnate, just a man who built a flat-pack empire out of frugality, focus, and an unshakable belief that wealth should never be loud. When you think of billionaires, you might imagine private jets, company shares, maybe a line of succession, something straightforward. But when it comes to Ingvar Kamprad's wealth, the trail is anything but clear. IKEA is one of the most successful retail brands in the world. At one point, its estimated valuation was over $60 billion. So you might expect Kamprad to appear on every billionaire list. But for decades, his name was either missing or surprisingly low. Why? Because Kamprad didn't own IKEA, at least not in the way we usually think. At the heart of IKEA's ownership lies a curious little entity called the Stichting Inca Foundation, based not in Sweden, but in the Netherlands. Technically, this foundation owns the Inca Group, which runs most IKEA stores around the world. The Stichting Inca Foundation isn't a typical nonprofit. It was created by Kamprad in the 1980s and structured in such a way that it both minimizes taxes and limits outside control of IKEA. It's one of the largest foundations in the world by assets, larger than many charitable giants. But its purpose is ambiguous. On paper, it's meant to support innovation in design and architecture. In practice, most of its activity is centered on holding IKEA. So while IKEA is technically owned by a foundation, that doesn't mean Kamprad wasn't in control. He simply wasn't the legal owner. He was the architect of a system that made ownership nearly untouchable. The deeper you look, the more complicated it gets. There's not just the Inca Foundation, there's also the Inter-IKEA Group, based in Luxembourg, which owns the IKEA brand and concepts. Then there's Interogo, a holding company in Liechtenstein, responsible for managing these intellectual properties. Each one is a separate entity. Each one is technically independent, but all were created with Kamprad's fingerprints on the plans. You might think of it like a nested set of IKEA boxes. IKEA stores are operated by Inca Group. Inca Group is owned by Stichting Inca Foundation. The IKEA brand is owned by Inter-IKEA Group. Inter-IKEA is ultimately controlled by Interogo Foundation. And every layer is based in a different low-tax European country. Kamprad explained this elaborate setup in very plain terms. He wanted to protect IKEA from shareholders, limit taxes, and ensure continuity after his death. He believed that if IKEA were a traditional corporation, it might eventually be taken public, or broken up, or fall under pressure from short-term investors. So he built a fortress instead. Every piece of the puzzle was designed to keep IKEA private, frugal, and eternal. Not a single share of IKEA could be sold, not a single vote could be traded. This wasn't just financial engineering, it was ideological architecture. Kamprad didn't want IKEA to ever lose its roots. In many ways, yes. IKEA avoided many of the pitfalls that plagued other large family businesses. There was no messy public offering, no activist shareholders, no sudden change in strategy when the founder stepped back. The system was so stable, in fact, that for years, no one really knew how wealthy Kamprad actually was. When Forbes eventually added him to its billionaires list, it was based largely on influence, not clear ownership. But Kamprad would often push back against this, insisting that he was not nearly as rich as reported. He once told a journalist that his wealth was largely theoretical, and in a strange way, he was right. He didn't live like a billionaire. He didn't even own most of the assets that his name was associated with, but he controlled them. And that distinction between ownership and control is part of what makes Kamprad's legacy so fascinating. In his will, Kamprad left instructions for IKEA to continue following its founding principles: simplicity, affordability, frugality. He even requested that no public monument be made in his honor. And when he passed in 2018, IKEA didn't go through a dramatic succession crisis. It kept running. Same flat packs, same meatballs, same maze-like stores. Because Kamprad had designed not just a company, but a structure. One that was meant to outlive him. Contrasting daily life, elite routine. Ingvar Kamprad was once one of the wealthiest people on the planet, but his daily life didn't look like it belonged to a billionaire. There were no super yachts, no palatial estates, no designer suits or diamond watches. Instead, Kamprad lived in a modest one-story home in the Swiss countryside, and later in a simple bungalow in the small Swedish town of Älmhult, the same place IKEA was born. His clothes were plain. His car was a 15-year-old Volvo 240, and for over a decade, he famously flew economy class, often bringing his own tea bags to avoid spending money at airports. Let's take a slow, quiet walk through a typical day in his curious billionaire life. Kamprad was an early riser. He believed in order, habit, and repetition, the kind of lifestyle that mirrored the IKEA catalog itself. Breakfast was unremarkable. Instant coffee, maybe a slice of crisp bread, sometimes a reheated leftover from the night before. He reportedly clipped coupons from newspapers and timed his grocery shopping to take advantage of evening discounts. These were not gimmicks. He wasn't pretending to be frugal for the press. He was just like this. His desk, like his company, was covered in papers and drafts, sketches of new store layouts, product lists, handwritten notes. He believed ideas came from humble places, and that excessive luxury dulled creativity. Kamprad stayed closely involved in the business long after stepping away from daily operations. He would call IKEA managers directly, not to scold, but to ask questions, to make suggestions. He'd listen, take notes, tell stories. He didn't demand boardrooms or presentations. Instead, he'd sometimes meet with employees in the store cafeterias, eating the same meatballs and lingonberry jam as everyone else. To him, leadership meant consistency, and not standing apart from his workers. One of the most symbolic images of Kamprad's life is the Volvo 240 GL he drove for years. It was a safe, reliable car, Swedish, functional, and not flashy. He only replaced it when Swedish road safety authorities told him it was too old to drive safely. When he traveled, he took buses, or flew coach, always coach. He hated waste, especially the kind that didn't benefit anyone. His passport photo showed him wearing a borrowed jacket, a size too big. His briefcase was scuffed and overused. These were the mundane, uninteresting details of a billionaire who didn't need to appear rich. Kamprad kept a journal, not for memoirs or public legacy, but for himself. He wrote about business ideas, about growing up, about people he admired and mistakes he made. He believed in reflection as a practice, a way to keep grounded in a world that often treated wealth like a performance. His evenings were quiet. He didn't attend galas. He didn't throw parties. He preferred sitting by a fire, listening to old Swedish radio programs, or rereading letters from IKEA customers. To Kamprad, even fame was something to be avoided. He once said, "If you lead with ego, you are no longer serving your company." Kamprad's daily routine is easy to overlook. There were no shocking moments, no headlines, no scandal. But that's the point. His life reminds us that great wealth doesn't always require great drama. Sometimes, it just means a larger-scale version of the values you already live by. Ingvar Kamprad was both wealthy and deliberately plain. He built one of the world's most recognizable companies, yet he lived in small spaces, dressed simply, and structured his fortune to be invisible. He didn't try to dazzle or dominate. He tried to last. And as you lie back now, drifting into sleep, maybe there's something comforting in that. That even the richest man in Sweden once clipped coupons and rode the bus home. Not because he had to, but because he believed that value, not wealth, was the point.